Hello and welcome to the quarterfinals of the team championship. We have now reached the KO mode, and I'm, as last time, not alone. I'm joined by my teammate Ristey. Welcome, Ristey.
Hello again, mate. Thank you for having me back. It's much appreciated and another honor.
Yeah, I think it's a good thing that we commentate those games together because, of course, during the game we, always have a lot of discussions and thinking about turns, and then I think it's good to also get your perspective. And this time for the quarterfinals, we are facing Arne and JensIV. So some tough opponents. Arne is a player who has already played on master level, I think both in Intermezzo and International Championship. Jens the Fourth is a player that I didn't know that much before the game. I checked at the moment he's playing on silver level in the International Championship, which is very solid. A tough team that has made it to the quarterfinals in this tournament. And of course, as a very quick reminder for those of you who don't know how those team games work, I play together with Ristey, and at the end, the team wins, the two players that have combined more culture than the other teams, and you are not allowed to offer pacts to your teammate. However, if the situation requires it, it is potentially possible to play aggressions or wars against the teammate. Yeah, those are basically the rules. And of course, it is allowed to have some discussion. That's basically no, uh, what you want from such a tournament. So those are the real rules for the tournament. And I think to start off the video, we can take a quick look at leaders and wonders. And I will quickly go through them, and then you, Ristey, can of course also add some things that you're maybe noticing about them. And we have the Internet together with Pia in H3. We have Marlene Dietrich together with the Hollywood, but no Chaplin and Fleming. We have Churchill, Gandhi, and the Manhattan Project for the military. So some different leaders and wonders to consider for that. Bill Gates, Steve Jobs, and Marie Curie as some lab leaders. In H2, we have the Ocean Liner service as a very strong wonder. There is actually Maria Theresa together with it as a strong combination. We have Newton, but no Nobel. We have Bach and Gaudi as some culture leaders. And then also Darwin. We have James Cook, but no Suez Canal. Napoleon as a strong military leader, also giving a military action, the same as Joan of Arc in H1. We have Saladin, Leonardo, and Gutenberg together. Michelangelo together with St. Peter's Basilica and Machu Picchu, which has some potential, and then also Isabella. We have both the Strength Wonders with Great Wall Nemeji, St. Peter's Basilica, but no Forbidden City. Both Universitas and Silk Road are missing. And yeah, is there anything special that you are noticing in this Leaders and Wonders mix?
Not particularly that you haven't already covered. The initial early aggressive play is pretty strong here. With the likes of Sun Tzu, Homer, Boudica going into Saladin's quite flexible for it. Joan, Barbarossa, and then you've got some good science synergy going into the later ages, which uh, offers some potential into the late game.
Yeah, so as always, a lot of leaders and wonders are in a mix, so a lot of different things are possible, but an early strength push or maybe some science setup for later on could certainly have the potential to pay off quite well. All right, then maybe you can start with taking a look at the game. Also, by the way, Arne and Jens, they wrote me a little bit about some specific turns and shared a little bit of their thoughts after the game has ended. So sometimes I will mention that if we are at such a turn, and we can get a little bit of insight in our opponent's decision making as well. And Arne starts his turn with taking the pyramids, which is a very strong pick. He leaves us the engineering genius, which we can take together with either leader or wonder now, which is of course quite strong. But if he leaves us the pyramids, of course, then we also just get a very strong wonder. So I think a fine decision by him. Then it's my turn, and of course, our turns are always a little bit connected depending on what I'm doing. It changes what you can be doing, and we have to consider what is best as a whole, as combined for both of us. And here, of course, definitely one of us wants to take the engineering genius, and I think also Boudica is a leader here that certainly wants to be taken. Also, and those team games and early aggressive play tends to be quite strong. So Sun Tzu was a leader that we was very much looking for here. And then the question was, in which combination do we want to take those things? And at the end, I went with Boudica and Acropolis here, already committing to a wonder. And the plan was that Ristey will now go for Engineering Genius and Sun Tzu, either getting maybe the Colossus at the next turn, or, and that was maybe the reason why I now committed to a wonder instead of taking the Engineering Genius. If the Colossus should be taken away, then with Ristey playing behind me, there's a bigger chance that maybe one of the new wonders can drop down into this one civil action area. Maybe I could even help with that, with taking certain cards in front of it from the row. So that was the reasoning behind that. And so I end up taking Boudica and Acropolis, and then we are at your turn.
Yeah, so as you said, we discussed who was going to take which cards and figured Engineering Genius was going to be taken by the one of us. So I took Engineering Genius, and then Sun Tzu was a good opening leader to pick with the military strength, with the potential of the Colossus at the second turn to double down on a strength push. We discussed taking the Hanging Gardens, especially with the happy faces for potentially Michelangelo and St. Peter's Basilica, but couldn't really come up with a strong argument for taking the Hanging Gardens over the Colossus. So settled on hoping Colossus would fall down for me, or potentially looking at Colosseum or an early age one wonder.
Yeah, and I think the good news for us is also that if Jens now wants to deny the Colossus, then there's no other card on the one civil action area that he can take together with it, which is a bit annoying for them. So either they go for the Colossus, which could certainly be strong for them, but then it's not ideal, not getting a yellow card in addition to that, or they leave us the Colossus, which then pairs very nicely with your Sun Tzu. Right, and now it was interesting to see whether Jens will go for the Colossus, but he doesn't. Instead, he goes for the Hanging Gardens and Moses, which is, of course, a strong combination, will net them a lot of population. And in the, when they shared their thoughts after the game, they just said that with the many populations, they wanted to stay a bit flexible in which direction they want to commit. Then it's Arne's turn, and there is a leader revealed, Hammurabi, which he will go for. Of course, having Hammurabi in Pyramids as a setup could potentially be a bit greedy against a bit of a military push from our side, but it's the only leader available and still a very strong one, so I think definitely the right call going for him here. And now it is my turn, and I will just do a very standard turn, going for Boudica, building my mine, increasing my population, and then taking the urban growth as just the most effective yellow card that I can take with not having built a second lab yet. I think no card rule reasons involved here to maybe take stockpile, so I just go for the urban growth, and then we are at your turn.
Yeah, so my second turn was relatively easy as well. Obviously, we want to elect Sun Tzu, then taking the Colossus, which is what we were hoping for initially anyway. So that adds a little bit of pressure to Arne's Hammurabi, which is quite nice. And then the I was looking at building a mine and popping as standard turns, and that kind of just saw out the turn really.
Yeah, also just a very standard turn. One thing that we didn't like to see is that the monarchy is coming down the row, which is of course a very nice card for Arne to get with Hammurabi in the pyramids, and this third military action might make him a bit safer, but I think there's no way that we can deny it here for 3 civil actions.
Yeah, it was rather expensive.
No. Then you get your first draw with Sun Tzu. Did you already get some interesting cards here?
Yeah, so my initial draws, I drew 4 cards in total. So I've got Knowledge of the Ancients, Rats, the Open Borders Agreement, which pacts in this kind of format is quite irrelevant, and the Heavy Cavalry Tactic.
Yeah. So already some different cards to consider. Jens starts his turn by taking the Urban Growth, goes for Moses, increases his population, and builds the third mine. Also a relatively standard turn, nothing special here. With taking the Urban Growth, he makes sure that the monarchy falls down to 2 civil actions for Arne. Arne will then take the monarchy, that was no surprise, builds the second lab to get some science production going, and is then also willing to take the alchemy, maybe being able to set up some science production. And there's also Leonardo coming down the row, which he might potentially hope for at the next turn. And then during my turn, I will actually seed the first event. I think generally with you having Sun Tzu and the Colossus, and with me at least also getting 1 additional strength out of the Acropolis, we have an interest in pushing the deck forward and maybe taking advantage of some strength events. And here I seeded a scientific breakthrough. But before we seeded that, we had to figure out, of course, what my turn will look like. And our decision at the end was that I will actually grab Leonardo this turn. We can discuss it a bit more after the event has been revealed, but with having then grabbed Leonardo, we were willing to put a scientific breakthrough in the deck despite Arne just having taken the alchemy. And the other option would have been the immigration. The development of civil life is revealed, which I will use, I think, to increase my population. I will take a science from Boudica, I will build the second lab, and then with the development of civil life especially, I have 3 civil actions left. I think the rich land for 1 civil action is just a card that is relatively effective to take, and then I have still 2 civil actions left. And I could, for example, just take the swordsman. Maybe having a military technology in hand could be quite strong. But at the end, we thought that maybe denying Leonardo from Arne could be worthwhile, stopping him from getting some very early strong science production. And also, while I don't have any alchemy or printing press yet, there are quite a bunch of copies of those technologies, and in a team game especially, there's always the possibility that you as my team partner will just pass on all the alchemies, so that I will for certain get one at some point. And Leonardo is just a very solid leader to have if you get him going. So I think going for Leonardo partly as a denial, but also because he has just a nice potential for myself, especially now with the scientific breakthrough, I think is a good call at the end. And now I draw 2 cards, 2 tactics. I also have my own copy of Heavy Cavalry now, and a Phalanx tactic, which is maybe a bit more easily usable. And then we are at your turn, and we had to think about whether to push or not.
Yeah, so we were looking at the cards that we could potentially seed, and considering that you'd just taken Leonardo, we decided that seeding the Knowledge of the Ancients for potentially extra science a little later down the line, and get that deck flipping as soon as possible if I was going to go for a strength push was beneficial. So seeded and revealed the development of settlements. So the first thing I had to look into was how I wanted to best use the development of civil life that you revealed, which we discussed and felt that just building the lab was the best course of action for that. And then I get the population back from development of settlements that I've just put into science. Then for the rest of the turn, we were looking at the Great Wall as a potential option once we completed the Wonder. So we agreed that 1 step of the Colossus for completion would be the best port of call. No pun intended for port of call, with the Colossus overlooking it. And then Swordsman was a good card to select. This is a good military card, along with Bread and Circuses. With Pierre, Darwin, and Gaudi in the game, it made the Bread and Circuses a very strong pick, as well as a good happy face solution.
Yeah, I think just have to spend some civil actions here. Great Wall could be very interesting, and then if you should get it, the Swordsman, of course, also maybe even more worthwhile for you to go for some big strength push. And with Pierre in the game, Bread and Circus is always a very solid pick. Then you again get
Yeah.
quite a bunch of draws going.
Yeah, so we decided to keep rats and the heavy cavalry, and sadly I discarded one pact and picked up another. So I got the naval trade agreement as one, and then I've got a couple of nice strength events in Crusades and Raiders, along with developed territory one, which gave us some options. Even though there's no real synergy for colonies, it can always be handy to have some knowledge of that. I've also got the Colossus for an added colonial bonus, as well as cartography being on the row. So
so colonization always can still be strong, if especially with the Colossus. So let's see if maybe the cartography will be available for us at the next turn. And at Jens' turn, he will start with increasing his population with Moses. Had also the development of civil life to increase his population with Moses for 0 food, then the development of settlements. So now all of a sudden he is sitting at a lot of population. And after building the second lab, he will actually go for Michelangelo, not electing him yet. He also wouldn't offer him any benefits yet, but an interesting pick. But together with the Hanging Gardens, can of course produce quite a lot of culture. Is a leader that just can generate a lot of value if you can start getting him to work. And with that, a bit of a speculative pick, but definitely also one with a lot of potential. Then it's Arne's turn. He will just do a monarchy revolution, I think, of course, with having Hammurabi. That's just a very strong thing to do. And he will now be playing on 5 civil and 3 military actions with Hammurabi on top. And at the next turn, he can either go for 2 alchemy upgrades or finish the pyramids. So definitely a strong economical start for Arne. Now it's my turn. I could potentially seed the immigration into the deck. However, with Jens having the Hanging Gardens, that's of course a bit of a questionable seed. And despite our interest being to push the deck forward, we at the end decided to rather pass on seeding that. And then I start my turn by taking the printing press. Of course, investing into printing presses can always be a bit greedy, but I have Leonardo here, and it just gives me the I can just get him online the most quickly with now going for printing press. I don't know when the next copies of Alchemy will be available. At least there is a leader like Antoni Gaudi, potentially Darwin in H2, and that could maybe then be a bit of a synergy later on. So I take the printing press, I elect Leonardo, I developed a printing press, I built one which already gets me out of corruption. And then for the last civil action, there are some different options. At the beginning of the turn, we actually decided to take food from Boudica, which now would give the option to increase the population, to just use the civil actions effectively. At the end, we actually decided against increasing the population. I think it would be a very solid move here to increase the population, but especially now that you have drawn some strength events, and as we maybe want to go for a little bit of a military direction to maybe counter Arne's strong economical setup, we made a call that I will go for the warfare here. I have now some strong science production with Leonardo, and I can probably without too much difficulty invest some science into the warfare, which gives me more draw, more strength, and will hopefully make sure that if you start pushing some strength events now, that I at least won't be the weakest and won't get hit by anything bad. So at the end, we were willing to take the warfare. At the end, still took the food from Boudica because I have now some strong science, and I've with having now invested into a third urban building with the printing press. I think having additional population also generally for the Acropolis can be quite worthwhile, and so we took the food here at the end. I kept both of the tactics, discarded the immigration, draw actually the border conflict as a potentially very interesting strength events, and then we are at your turn.
Yeah, so we had a discussion on whether what to seed. We realized pretty quickly we wanted to seed to get the deck moving again. So the discussion was over whether to seed Crusades or Raiders. We decided that we would seed Crusaders because the position of your position, the uncertainty of your position meant that you could get caught up in Raiders, and we would like to sort of just make sure that it was beneficial for like potentially myself as the strongest, and then just keep you away from the weakest position if that was to happen. So for after seeding, we revealed the development of crafts. So it was an additional 2 resources, which thankfully, finishing off my harbor entrance still kept me out of corruption. So completing the Colossus meant that I could then look to focus on protecting my onshore assets with the Great Wall in another turn of events where looking for a wonder meant that I could still take it by my next turn, as we were looking at it the last turn. And then this gave me the additional strength and potentially push more strength moving forward again. So with the final civil action, we deemed that irrigation was ideal to generate some more food in the long run, which we could then use for population for increasing strength further.
No.
As for cards, we decided that we wanted to keep the Raiders, and then it was a toss up whether we kept some of the other cards. We opted to keep the territory, and then for my draws, I managed to land Foray, so I've got another strength event in hand. Dark Ages, which is always good to have knowledge of, especially in your situation with Leonardo.
That's true.
The Good Harvest, yeah, the Good Harvest and a Kidnap. So I landed an aggression, but no real tactic at the moment.
Yeah, so I think just a very solid turn. Colossus combined with the Great Wall just has some really big potential. Ideally, you now would be drawing an infantry tactic, so we were hoping towards that. There was the cartography in the row, so certainly something to consider here with the developed territory in hand. But I think sometimes it's better to focus on one thing than just trying to do 2 things at once, going for colonization and some strength events. And here, with having the option to get a Great Wall, I think we felt just let's focus on pushing more strength instead of also trying to do something with cartography. And then I think having irrigation for some additional food production is just a better pick at the end. Then Jens will take the other copy of irrigation, will take the reserves, will take the breakthrough, so takes a bunch of cards, now has to get out of corruption, will do that actually by building a 4th mine and a 2nd warrior. 4th mine is of course interesting, but if you have Moses and Hanging Gardens, I think it's just a very solid thing to do, especially because there were also development of civil life and settlement to give even more population. And with building the mine, the warrior still has enough resources to maybe finish the Hanging Gardens at the next turn. With taking those cards, he also lets the knights and the engineering genius fall down to 1 civil action for Arne, so maybe taking all of those cards also had to do with giving those cards for cheaper for Arne, who will take those, will also take a copy of iron, then upgrades one of his labs, builds a warrior, and at the next turn can use the engineering genius to very effectively finish his pyramids. Now it is my turn, and I first of all will start my turn by seeding the border conflict. We will have to see how nicely I can avoid of being the weakest. I don't have the knights, a copy of knights here to fulfill my phalanx tactic. Nonetheless, at least I have the warfare and the strength of the Acropolis, and so we are still willing to seed the border conflict, hoping that it will benefit you and hopefully not hurt me. The development of religion is revealed, which I think is a nice thing to see for me, with having the Acropolis, having now even another urban building. And this turn, there are 2 interesting technology cards for me available for 1 civil action. There's a copy of Iron, and then there's also a copy of Code of Laws. And the question was whether to get one of those things going or both of those things, and how whether to maybe first start with going for an Iron upgrade or maybe developing the Code of Laws. And I think taking the iron is something that we concluded should certainly be done here, because the next copy of iron, which is also the last one, will be available for you. And if you end up taking it, then Jens will be the player who misses out on iron. And with him having Michelangelo, I think that is a good news for us, because with having some strong resource production, Michelangelo is able to build even more wonders. And so it now is maybe a good chance to deny them from the last copy of iron. So I certainly wanted to take a copy of iron. The thing is, even if I now just go for 2 iron upgrades, it's not enough to get me out of corruption because of the 1 resource that I get from Leonardo. So normally maybe that could be a clean turn and maybe that could be enough to pass on the Code of Laws, but to get out of corruption I now actually would have to finish the Acropolis and increase my population, which I guess would also be a fine turn, but at the end with having some strong science production and maybe still potentially planning on going into an H1 government form with having that big Acropolis discount, we at the end decided to take the Code of Laws, and then now that only one iron upgrade would be possible after having taken both cards, developing the Code of Laws felt better to just get the civil action earlier, and then I can finish the Acropolis, get a bit of additional strength, a bit of additional culture, but sadly I don't get out of corruption, which is not ideal, but this turn it was just difficult to avoid it, and at the end we concluded that just securing both of those cards for myself is at the end more important than to avoid corruption this turn. Now we were somewhat hoping that maybe development of science or trade routes is one of the two remaining developments, because that would actually allow me to already at the next turn get into iron if I need to, or maybe also into a copy of knights if one should be on the row for me. And then I draw 2 cards, another tactic, the medieval army, as well as a plunder. And we are at your turn.
Again, we had the similar situation to previous, where we were weighing up which card to seed. Raiders was kind of same situation as before, so we opted to seed Foray, which would potentially have at least one of us benefit, hopefully the both of us. And then that revealed the development of agriculture, sadly, so no additional help for your science production. And then going into my turn, I developed irrigation and upgraded a farm to push more population. Gave a valued food for the fight, and then with good harvest in hand, there was some synergy to make sure that it was going to benefit us at some point. Then we decided that popping and building a warrior to drive additional strength with our knowledge of several strength events was a very aggressive approach and might put pressure on our 2 opponents. So we were again looking at civil actions that left, and figured that, as you rightly said from your turn, it was probably beneficial again if we both had the copy of iron. So taking the last copy of iron away from Jens, so his decision to build the 4th mine on his previous turn was probably a good call for himself, and we weren't going to let his Michelangelo become too strong with a strong iron resource production.
Yeah, and I think for the turn we also considered, instead of going for the irrigation upgrade, to go for an iron upgrade, because you would have had enough science to develop it. But I think in such a situation where it's a bit of strength pushing going on, also with some aggressive potential, getting the food production going earlier can just be at the end more important. So at the end we opted against the earlier increase of resource production in order to get more population out.
Yeah, we obviously had the events that gave us more food and the ability to get more population out, but we figured that, again, like you said, it was better to have more food in the long term to drive more strength to potentially disrupt our opponents' plays a bit more.
Now, and at the end of your turn, of course, we were very interested. Do you draw an infantry tactic?
So I kept Raiders in the Good Harvest. Then I drew Uncertain Borders, a colony card, and thankfully the Legion tactic. So I did actually make a good draw for a tactic that I can utilize Sun Tzu for.
Yeah, so that we were very, very happy to see. And in addition to that, also the Uncertain Borders. So I think a draw that we were quite happy about. Then Jens.
Yeah, I mean that's sorry. There was just a lot of knowledge of our strength events at the moment. I'm not sure how many we had, but it was it was quite a big one.
Yeah.
Quite a vast knowledge.
So now Jens pushes an event into the deck. With that, it will be that we don't have full knowledge about the event deck, which we almost would have had. Now they have one of the of the 6 events in the deck are from them, meaning that we don't have full knowledge, which can be important. So we always have one unknown event to maybe worry about, and the event deck is now flipped. And Jens this turn will take the Free Religion, will increase his population, and doesn't finish the Hanging Gardens yet. Instead wants to go for the Knights and has here the Medieval Army tactic, which is certainly a helpful tactic for him. And at the next turn, with having the reserves, he could potentially just finish the Hanging Gardens, play the reserves for resources, and then he could build another knight. So they have here now a nice response to our strength push, are even taking the are even now the strongest, and that is of course a bit worrisome because if Arne now seeds, I'm the weakest, you are not the strongest, that could be a bad time for one of the strength events to be revealed. However, we do get a bit lucky in the sense that at least there is no strength event revealed like Crusades or Border Conflict, and instead the Foray, which at the ends up being a somewhat neutral event here, giving both each team one player who will benefit from it. Arne will then take the Free Religion as well, finishes the Pyramids, goes for another lab upgrade, has now just a very strong economy going, takes Joan of Arc. She will help him to get a bit more strength, a bit of event knowledge at the beginning of his turns, and so I think a very, very solid setup that he is having here. And now it is my turn, and here, first of all, I don't have the option to push, but even if I would have, we wouldn't have pushed because we are not prepared for the strength events that are in the deck. And yeah, then it's my turn, and there were no development of science or trade routes revealed, meaning I don't have enough science to go for iron. I also don't have enough science to go for warfare. So the question is how to exactly increase my strength the best. I have the phalanx tactic, which I could hope to still get the knights for, but I also know that you very likely will now upgrade the legion tactic for your great walls, so just building some warriors could be fine as well. And another card on the row that helps with the strength is actually the Theocracy here, which we at the end decided to go for. It's just extremely cheap with the Acropolis. I only have to pay 2 signs for it. I think we even thought about potentially now even building another printing press before developing the Theocracy and then increasing the population again to help a bit with to get out of corruption. But that could be nice, would make the Theocracy even cheaper, would put me at even more science production, and maybe it could be fine, but at the end we rather wanted to leave more population available to invest into the military. Maybe investing into the printing press could have been fine, and if it would have needed, I could then at some point delete a lab if I need a population. So maybe that could be an interesting idea, but at the end we developed it without another printing press, and then I built a warrior, I built another warrior, going up to 5 strength already, taking the rich land, which I can do now thanks to not having put another civil action into building a printing press. And with those 2 rich lands, I will be able to soon get my iron upgrades going very, very quickly. And so I think it could have been an interesting idea to go for another printing press, but with all of our knowledge about the strength events, maybe at the end better to just keep more population for the military. Now I could still delete a lab if it's really needed and get even another military unit. So the Theocracy just being very helpful. Also with the happy face, allowing myself to, even after the loss of the 2 yellow tokens at the end of the age, still having no uprising issues. And then I only draw 1 card. It is actually an event, a strategic territory, so I have the option to push if it is good for us at the next turn, and then we are at your turn.
Yeah, so with 3 seedable cards, it was a difficult decision, but we figured that given what we'd pushed into the deck and Jens having overtaken me in strength, it was probably best not to seed, which was a little upsetting, but obviously it provoked a reaction from Sun Tzu, so we figured that developing Swordsman, then popping and building one directly would push strength, and then revealing the Legion tactic, which was a godsend draw from the previous turn, would take me up to 9 strength. And as my last 2 civil actions, we figured that getting 2 stages in on the Great Wall was the best use of the civil actions and threatens more strength again at the next turn, where I have exactly the 5 resources required to finish the Great Wall in case of the strength requiring another push.
Yeah, so I think you're looking quite threatening now. You at the next turn can go up to 12 strength, as you said, with finishing the Great Wall, and then soon you will get the Colossus draw, so certainly a bit worrisome for our opponents. Jens at least has the medieval army, Arne a lot of military action, so maybe they can be somewhat safe, but hopefully we will be able to win some strength events. So sadly, Jens at his turn will again be able to build another knight if he wants to, which then would be enough to overtake you again. So maybe we have to be even more, have to wait even a little bit longer until we are well prepared to maybe win those strength events.
Yeah, it was obviously Jens is in a good position to push strength again. So we decided that in terms of cards, we would keep Raiders and Uncertain Borders as 2 good strength cards, considering my turn this time was solely focused on military strength. And then with my last 2 draws, I drew a vast 1, so yet another colony, which is quite sad. And I think your comment was, where was Christopher Columbus when we needed him? And sadly, he wasn't on display
No.
to even be an option. And then I drew a fighting band tactic, which thankfully, due to Legion, I shouldn't need.
No. Sometimes it can, of course, still be beneficial to upgrade a fighting band tactic. If you maybe will end up being on 4 units, it could give you 1 strength more. So still nice to have an additional option, but with the Legion tactic, we are already well prepared for the military with your Great Wall. And Jens will then finish the Hanging Gardens, doesn't even need to play the reserves now for additional resource because he took 2 resources and 1 food from the foray. Builds an additional knight, is now at 10 strength, so sadly again being the strongest. Arne sees now the top event, so if there's something like border conflict, they could now decide to push it out of the deck before you will overtake Jens again in strength, and accepting maybe that Arne would lose the event. There's no border conflict, but instead the Crusades, so that also basically ends up being a neutral event, Jens gaining and Arne losing some culture. Arne then could have gone for Iron this turn, but wants to increase his strength, which I think is a good idea. Builds a warrior, copies the medieval army tactic, takes the code of laws, the cultural heritage, and a breakthrough, so has now the ability to quickly get into Iron code of laws with those additional science yellow cards. And then it is my turn, again not beneficial for us to see it, with our opponents again having overtaken us in strength. And then it's my turn, and this turn I sadly can't that easily make sure to get stronger again. There's no copy of Knights in the row. If I would have been willing to go for that, is the question anyway, because I can also just copy the upgraded Legion tactic, but also no copy of Swordsman in the row. Just developing the warfare is not enough to really get me stronger anyway. I don't have my own infantry tactic, so here we just accepted that sadly I will be the weakest for a while, potentially getting hit by the border conflict, but soon hopefully I will be able to copy the Legion tactic at some point. And also we did another thing this turn that will maybe allow me to get a bit stronger at some point. I will start the turn by going for the Iron, going for 1 upgrade, going for another upgrade that gets me out of corruption. I could now just go for a 3rd upgrade, maybe take 1 card like reserves or maybe drama to have it in hand for potential Gaudi or something. And getting the 3rd mine upgrade certainly would be nice, but I think there is a wonder that is very interesting here, and that is the Magic Castle. And at the next turn I could potentially even finish it if I develop the warfare, and then maybe that could help me getting some strength, and just a good wonder to have. I have a little bit of a greedy line taken early on the game with the printing press, and now I'm producing some nice culture. Image will produce me even more culture, but with the additional strength I can maybe very well hide behind it and be a bit more safe. So I think it's just very strong to pick up that wonder here instead of getting the mine upgrade done quicker. Then at the end of my turn I draw some cards. I have now also my own copy of Fighting Band, and also the Barbarians could be interesting. I'm of course producing some good culture, but Jens, with having now religion and the hanging gardens together with Michelangelo, might very well produce even more. So the barbarians a potentially interesting event. And then we are at your turn.
So as you said, for your turn, again with Jens's strength push, we decided not to seed. You obviously being the weakest and me not being the strongest didn't make any sense. So with limited number of cards left in the deck, meant Sun Tzu's days were numbered. So a leader to replace him was sought, and Saladin being an obvious cheap choice for one civil action, having some flexibility for strength as well as the additional civil action if I wanted, was a very nice pick. So with the first few tasks, Saladin was designated. He completed the Great Wall. As we discussed last turn, that was left with exactly the number of resources required in case of a strength push required. And that took me up to 12 strength. Then the last civil action was basically up for discussion. I think we had quite I wouldn't say a long discussion, but we looked into Urban Growth 1 due to my low resource production and having used up all of my resources on 3 bronze mines not being ideal. Bach's presence in the game made the drama take viable, but ultimately, after a discussion, you told me I was being too greedy with the looking into drama, and that maybe popping was the best course of action due to my low civil action count, and would ultimately be better placed going forwards if we needed to use the population for something.
No, I think drama certainly could be a very interesting pick here with Bach in the game and with you having Colossus and Great Wall. Maybe you could go for cheap Bach drama setup with Bach and just protect yourself with your nice wonders. But we are also entering H2 next turn, so if there are some key cards like a government form, maybe an early copy of Coal, scientific method, then there will now be just more freedom to maybe take some of those cards if needed.
Yeah, I definitely feel it was the right play. I was just blinkered on by being a bit too greedy on the culture grabbing.
Yeah, but I think it's definitely very much worth considering the drama here, the urban growth. So it was a tough choice here for the last civil action.
Yeah, for sure. So looking at the 2 cards to keep, we decided to keep the strength events again in Raiders and Uncertain Borders with having push strength. And looking at Jens's civilization, he's only got 1 free population that he can put into, for example, the knights that takes him to 12 strength, which only ties me for strongest in this situation. So we figured that keeping those 2 cards were potentially seedable for next turn, and my 2 draws were the second copy of the Legion tactic and the Phalanx tactic, which I believe you drew as well. So we had quite a lot of tactics draws throughout Age 1.
Yeah, so that was some good knowledge. While there could have been here the option to maybe upgrade a fighting band tactic actually with the thought in mind to soon go for a 4th infantry unit and maybe get even more strength. The problem here would have been that then you would be at 11 strength and Jens could just overtake you again with a knight, but now a knight is not enough for him to make sure to overtake you. And Jens is actually going for an interesting, maybe a bit of a greedy pick here, but greediness can sometimes be a very good choice. He goes for the St. Peter's Basilica. At the moment, he doesn't really need the happy faces that much. However, if he gets even more population out, he might actually need them relatively soon. And of course, it will produce him a lot of culture with Michelangelo. He could have played it maybe a bit more safe, could have gone for alchemy, but I think being a bit of greedy, maybe hoping for some scientific methods or something, could just be very interesting. So a bit of a greedy pick, but certainly one that also could make it that they will generate quite a bit of a culture lead. And then he will build a step. Takes the drama is now also set up for Bach. Dramas with St. Peter's Basilica, of course, also a way to just have more than enough happy faces for the rest of the game. Now H2 will start, and of course, we were interested to see what you would draw with the Colossus. So maybe you can tell us what interesting things you got.
Yeah, so my 3 draws were economic progress, the autonomous territory, and the aggression annex.
Okay, so again, Vlada giving us the option to maybe go into a bit of a colony direction. Let's see if we will again refuse it or maybe appreciate it. Arne starts his turn by seeding. He of course knows what is on top, and it's the scientific breakthrough again, at least in regard what the players are getting out of it, a neutral event. So I think all 3 events basically have been very neutral ones so far. Both teams gain a total amount of 6 science. For Arne, it's somewhat helpful though, because that allows him to potentially get into Code of Laws and Iron if he wants to, but maybe he will also go into Swordsman. But no, he will actually go into Iron, and I think that was only possible because of the scientific breakthrough, so that certainly benefits him quite nicely. He then plays the Cultural Heritage. He's now at 7 civil actions, 4 military actions, will start getting some iron production going, so just again has a very solid position. But I will soon hopefully be able to at least overtake him in strength, and then he might be the weakest and could potentially get hurt by some strength events. And also there's a very interesting technology for me revealed during my turn, which also our opponents noted in, when sharing their thoughts. They were not too happy to see those riflemen, as that now gives me a very clear solution on how to get stronger and be very competitive in the strength. So it is of course expensive grabbing those riflemen for 3, but we have knowledge about all the strength events that are in the deck, and also the ones that we still have in hand with the barbarians and I think the uncertain borders. So I think it should be very worthwhile to go for the riflemen here, and then when I take them, I don't have enough resource to finish the Meiji Castle because I don't have the civil action left to also develop a technology, and so instead we needed a different way to get out of corruption. And also, of course, I want to get stronger for the strength event, so I developed the rifleman. I go for 2 upgrades to get out of corruption. And then with the last civil action, I went for another iron upgrade with the Richland. I could have even gone for a 3rd upgrade Ralphman, but then I would be missing the 1 resource in order to do the last upgrade, and 9 strength is enough for now to avoid being the weakest. So I felt it should be enough. At the next turn, the upgraded Legion will be ready to copy. So then, and also with soon maybe finishing the Meiji Castle, I might actually be in a very strong position strength-wise, which I think is strong for us. And with that Rifleman dropping down, I think definitely good for us. And then I draw sadly only a pact, the Scientific Corporation, which we can't use in this game, and we are at your turn.
In my political phase, there's some irony in the politics phase, but we had a good discussion about whether you were going to cede on your turn, and we decided against it because at that point you were the weakest, and with the commitment into rifleman and getting stronger was a good time for me to cede and maybe not take a gamble on a damaging event for you. So the irony in this is that I ceded uncertain borders and instantly revealed a border conflict. So these borders were going to be hotly contested already, and thankfully, due to holding off, our borders between the 2 of us weren't contested, and I was hitting Arne as the weakest, which was very good for us and a very good decision on our behalf not to cede on your turn. So on my turn, with bronze becoming outdated, it looked like the development of the iron mines was in demand. So we developed iron and a double upgrade to increase the production of some very valuable resources. Didn't go amiss. With the last 2 civil actions, we felt the patriotism 1 for 2 civil actions was a solid pick, considering it would have helped Jens with a free population and potentially looking to increase strength, or at least it could help Arne shake being the weakest if he managed to find a happy face solution as well in his turn. So yeah, we figured that picking patriotism 1 was very good for my denying our opponents we did look at the potential of taking scientific method for 3 civil actions, but when we discussed getting my science engine going, we did look at the fact that Jens was probably the only person that wanted the scientific method out of Arne, who already had alchemies fully developed. So at my turn, leaving it on 3 civil actions was a very expensive grab for Jens on his 4 civil actions. So the plan was that he wouldn't take it, and then I could potentially take it, or even if you wanted to increase your Leonardo ability again, it was a solid option for us both.
Yeah, so I think that was also an interesting discussion here, with you potentially would having the option to, instead of going for the iron upgrades, to go into one scientific method upgrade. But I think you voiced already very nicely that there's some good hopes that we still get it at the next turn. And one important thing is also, I think, that the knowledge of the ancients is actually one of the 2 remaining events, which, if revealed before your next turn, gives you actually the option to get into the scientific method at the next turn. And now, another option that I maybe just noticed right now could have maybe, instead of taking the patriotism, could have been to go for one less iron upgrade and take the revolutionary idea, as you could use the science quite nicely. But I think just being efficient and getting the upgrade going, especially also with maybe the ocean liner service being a target, I think should still be a very solid pick. And maybe the patriotism allows you to even get stronger while still continuing your upgrades.
So cards that we were looking at keeping, we wanted to keep seedable cards to push the event deck again. So Raiders and Economic Progress were decided we would keep, and with my 2 draws, I drew a War Over Territory and an Infiltrate. So Vlad kind of sending me signals that he might want me to deviate from the colonies I keep turning away after discarding autonomous territory and offering me a military outlet. And for Saladin, we decided to take the civil action again.
Yeah, so and it will be interesting to see whether we can make use out of those um, wars or aggressions. And for Jens' turn, with the scientific method staying on 3, if he wanted to take it, he couldn't finish the St. Peter's Basilica, which I think would be quite annoying for him, so he decides against taking it. There's also the ocean liner service dropping, which of course would also be a nice thing for Michelangelo, but he can't finish St. Pete's and take the Wonder, so now during Arne's turn, they have to decide whether they want to take it or not. But of course, with finishing the St. Peter's Basilica, Jens is now at 10 culture production, so it's really starting to get quite a bit of a lead in that regard. And with the last 2 civil actions, he will end up taking the selective breeding. And now it's Arne's turn, and he will just grab the ocean liner. He needed to lose a mine to the border conflict, so his resource production is a little bit disrupted. And then he has 3 civil actions remaining, and again he will do an expensive pick with taking the strategy. And they wrote in their that, of course, that was a very expensive grab, but they felt that they just couldn't let us have those cards. The ocean liner could have been used by you quite nicely, and the strategy maybe by me with having some good science production, and soon I could be quite a menace with my strength, with having the Hemichi, copying the Legion, getting the strategy to get more military actions. So it's very expensive. They can't upgrade. Arne can't upgrade his resource production like that, but I think it might be the correct choice, and here it pays off for Arne that he has set himself up with that many civil actions. And then it is my turn, and now we are finally in a position where you are the strongest, I'm not the weakest, so of course we wanted to push, and with Jens now having that much culture production, the Barbarians is just, I think, a very safe seed for us, which hopefully can also do some damage. Knowledge of the Ancients is revealed, meaning at your turn you have the option to go for scientific method if you wanted to. And then at my turn, I will start by finishing the Meiji Castle. As you said during your last turn, there is the option of maybe myself going for the scientific method for a very big Leonardo boost, but I have already some solid science and maybe just pushing a bit more of strength now instead. I think actually the Raiders, I think, is not in the current event deck. It's in the next one, so Yeah, but just getting more strength with Dimitri Castle, and I also will be able to copy the Legion tactic this turn, going up to 14 strength. And then there are quite a bunch of interesting cards coming down the row, where we also at your turn then had to consider which one of those to take and which maybe to deny, because there's a copy of cannons, which of course is nice for me to have, but maybe even more important for you with having the Great Wall. There's also a copy of Knights and Cavalrymen. If especially I don't take either of them, I might be in danger of not having the option to go for a cavalry attack. There's a copy of Revolutionary Idea, which would be especially nice for you to have, maybe also nice to deny from our opponents. And there's an early copy of Republic coming down the row, which you might want to have to first of all get into it yourself, but also deny it from Jens. So a lot of cards coming down the row, and we had to think about which one of us takes which one of those cards. And also, while I, for example, could take the Revolutionary Idea, the thing is, it also would have is quite nice here, I think, if I make it that the scientific method drops down to 1 civil action for you, which if I only take the Revolutionary Idea here for 2 and then maybe develop warfare or something for the last civil action, the scientific method stays on 2 for you, which we wanted to avoid. I need a cavalry attack, so if I take the Revolutionary Idea, I probably should take the Knights. At the end, we decided that I just go for the cavalryman, which makes it that the scientific method drops to 1, and then I will develop the warfare going up to 15 strength, which makes me maybe even more threatening. I get additional draws, maybe increasing the chances to make use out of my strength with either an aggression or a war. And the strategy is already taken, so I don't necessarily need to leave myself open for that technology. So at the end, I feel that's a good solution. But at your turn, there might be too many good cards on the row for you to take, so there will be some tough choices to be made at your turn. And at the end of my turn, I will draw another colonization card and the international negotiations, so another strength event. And then it's your turn.
As you rightly said, there's a lot of very nice looking cards on the row, and I think this turn caused quite a lot of headache, especially for myself, as I think I was complaining to you quite a lot about wanting to boost the economy, get scientific methods going, or deny and take very valuable cards, deny cards from our opponents, and having eyes on potentially Newton as a replacement leader. So after several discussions, we decided it was probably easier if we just started with the politics phase and work one at a time. So we decided Raiders was a very good seed because you'd become the strongest, meaning it's the first time I hadn't minded being overtaken in strength, and I was the second strongest. So we managed to reveal Pestilence, which was kind of frustrating, but I had an idle population to lose, so I didn't mind too much. And then going into the turn, again with lots of considerations made towards revolutionary idea, eyes on sort of Newton, looking at cannons and Republic being good for us, also good for our opponents, and Jens being on 4 civil actions with 16 science could easily take Republic on the next turn and increase his civil actions count. We kind of figured that scientific method should go onto the back burner, and then taking cards this turn was probably the best course of action, which again, I think it felt this turn for me was quite a setup turn and quite expensive in just taking cards, much how Arne felt when he took Ocean Liner Service and the strategy at his turn. But the key cards, I think we highlighted and snagged at the sort of economical stall. So we decided we would grab the copy of cannons, especially with my Great Wall, as you rightly said, and the Republic to keep Jens on 4 civil actions for longer. And then we had a bit of a discussion about Newton saving civil actions over the 2 science for a kind of a deciding factor for developing the scientific method, for example.
No, so no, at the end, I think just all those cards are very important, and it even still felt not great to let the Revolutionary Idea fall down to Jens, but giving him the, as you said, the option to go for Republic is just too much. think we even very briefly discussed if maybe even going for Newton this turn could have been an option with electing him and going for 1 upgrade to go up to 6 science production already. But yeah, the cannons with your Great Wall and Republic, so important cards. So you had to do this sort of setup turn.
Yeah, it was a very tough decision. I think it was one of the tougher decisions we made, mainly because it was leaving our opponent something, missing out on certain bits of my civilization, i.e., pushing the science production, and then making sure I got good cards to use as a future setup. But I think it's open to interpretation, but I do think we made a very good call, especially in the Republic denial.
Yeah. So and then at the end of your turn, you draw two new cards.
Yeah, so we kept economic progress and the war over territory, and then I drew another aggression after getting rid of one. So I drew the spy and another card that potentially seed in the arms industry.
No. And also, we at the beginning of your turn saw the pestilence, so that was the one event that was seeded by our opponents. They said they were hoping to see it a little bit earlier because I think especially I didn't have a free population for a while, so it could have been a bit better for them if it would have been revealed a bit more quickly. So that maybe not being ideal for them. Jens then starts the turn with going for the selective breeding, goes for an upgrade, plays the reserves for resources, doesn't have any corruption issues, then takes the revolution already. I think just a very solid, straightforward turn. Now that the Republic isn't available for him, he is further stuck on 4 civil and 2 military actions, which is of course problematic. At the same time, of course, he is producing 10 culture per turn. Arne this turn goes for Maria Theresa, and together with the Ocean Liner, she's of course a very strong leader. Can also use her to maybe slowly build up some military. So yeah, potentially very strong leader. Goes for the strategy this turn, builds a step of the Ocean Liner, and makes the active decision here to maybe rather maximize the resources of Maria with not building the additional knight. Also maybe to just finish the Ocean Liner as quickly as possible. Like this, he at the next turn can build the additional knight with Maria's resources and finish the Ocean Liner. But of course, it comes at the cost of staying weakest for another turn cycle, which could get potentially punished by the events that we put in there. Then it's my turn. I'm now even the strongest, so good. And we are both the two strongest, so I start pushing the international negotiations. The event revealed is the uncertain borders, which I'm actually now the one profiting from. And with the population loss of the pestilence, that additional yellow token is actually quite nice because then I can actually use the 3 food that I have lying around to increase my population. So very good reveal for us. Arne is the weakest and will now lose a yellow token. And then this turn is also just a somewhat straightforward one, very solid one. I take the selective breeding, I can develop it thanks to that one resource from Leonardo. I cannot only go for for 1, but even for 2 upgrades. We had knowledge about rats, which we discarded earlier, so we didn't need to be concerned about that, and so I can just get my production going, can increase my population 2 times at the next turn, and with that maybe can at some point build more urban buildings for the Acropolis. So I think it's just quite strong here for me to get a selective breeding going, and I also didn't really need it to leave it available for you as you already have the irrigation. So a relatively straightforward turn here. I can keep all of my cards in hand and will draw 3 new ones, which are a Warver technology, a spy, and a trade agreement. So again, some potentially aggressive cards which we might be able to use. And then we are at your turn.
We decided that because we were both the strongest, we would see the economic progress, and thankfully the call to arms was revealed, so it was a double hit for our opponents.
Yeah, and I think that
And
was actually an event not pushed by us, so a pleasant surprise to see that one.
definitely we love a bit of self-sabotage. And then I had a full hand at this point, so I had to play patriotism in order to take Newton, and then deciding to swap Newton in, swapping the CA efficient Saladin for the CA saving, civil action saving Newton seemed in hand. And then putting Newton straight to work, developing the scientific method for free, and then double upgrading for maxing out his potential seemed very beneficial here and set me up very nicely. Then we decided that a double warrior upgrade for full usage of the patriotism was also a very strong play. This took me up to 14 strength, so still one behind you, but again further pushed our strength. So then with the last civil action and no colony play, realistically, the navigation didn't seem like a particularly good pick, and we opted for the architecture. So the denial of opera wasn't really an option because Jens already had drama, which would go very nicely with Bach potentially. And for myself, I could get a culture engine going here, but we figured that with architecture, there's another copy and multiple ways of getting a better culture engine going, and the architecture could do so very cheaply in the future.
Yeah, so I think a good pick. Sadly, we won't save any resource for the scientific methods, but those upgrades need to happen ASAP. And also, with now being at +8, you have just enough science to get into Republic at the next turn, which will give you further a very nice boost.
Yeah. Yeah, the leaving of myself on 11 science was very nice. So when we discussed it, it was kind of key to getting the extra civil actions from Republic on the next turn, which was really handy. And then for my cards to keep, we decided to keep the war and the arms industry. And then with my one draw, I drew a very blessed tactic in the defensive army. So definitely Vlad are looking down upon me in good light for once.
Yeah, no, that's of course the perfect tactic. You have the cannons already in hand, and with that, we knew that you will have quite some strong military potential. Sadly, of course, you have now the Republic in hand. Of course, you could still go for Conmon, but with having it in hand, it should be more efficient to go for Republic. The strategy is already taken away, so you will be somewhat limited in your military actions on how to make use out of this potential strength, but still an extremely good draw for us. And also, what was very good for us is actually the one civil action that Jens lost to the call to arms. It's quite annoying for him because without it, he could have now gone for one coal upgrade this turn, but now he's missing the one civil action and instead has to just take it. Can at least get out of corruption with going for another food upgrade, so I think that's fine as well, but still, with him being that low in civil action, even losing only one is just very painful. Arne then can finish the ocean liner service this turn with going for the architecture, which I think is very strong. He has enough science to support the architecture, has now finished the ocean liner, goes for a knight with Maria, is now still one of the two weakest, but has left the role of being the weakest now to his teammate Jens. Then takes also the efficient upgrade to maybe get that second iron bronze mine to iron upgraded very quickly. It's my turn. I see the strategic territory. I think here at least it could have been discussed to maybe go for war over technology. The thing is, Jens doesn't have any blue technologies, and maybe he can just nicely spend most of his science. For example, if he plays the revolutionary idea, he has enough to get into coal and republic, and then I would only steal 2 science from him. It's a military action investment. Also, maybe now I can play it a bit more peacefully and don't necessarily need to build some military if I don't want to. I could have also tried a spy. Jens only needs one H2 card, had just one additional draw with the call to arms, so it could have been worth a try, but we still have some potentially beneficial cards in the deck, and so at the end we decided on just pushing here. And the event revealed is the cultural influence, one of our opponent's events, giving now even more for culture boost to Jens. And this turn I will start by increasing my population. I will build another printing press. I had lost a lab earlier on, I think, to a population loss. Now I can regain my science production, get even more culture production going. And then I will again increase my population, spend as many civil actions, or spend those civil actions, my civilization. We didn't want to commit another population into something like printing press. It could have been done. Maybe especially because one of my picks will now be the frugality. Maybe I could spare the population, but I also still have some military potential, so we left ourselves the freedom to choose at one of the future turns what to do with the population, and then I took the frugality, the efficient upgrade, went for an upgrade with not investing further resources into another printing press. I can go for this upgrade, make use out of my free military action, get even a bit stronger. Maybe if Jens doesn't increase his strength, I at the next turn could try the spy that I have in hand and just take 2 yellow cards. The frugality, I think, being a very nice one, allowing myself an additional population increase at the next turn. While the efficient upgrade, it has to be seen how nicely I can use it, but there's always the chance to upgrade my printing presses, maybe go into oil or something, so hopefully there will be a use for that card. But maybe it could have been an idea to actually grab the journalism instead of the efficient upgrade. Maybe that could have been an idea, because at the moment there's no clear use for the efficient upgrade, apart of course from organized religion, which there are still 2 copies, so for that probably it could end up being useful, so I guess at the end fine to go for this efficient upgrade. I will draw some cards, and I get one event, the civil unrest, and 2 tactics, the fortifications, and a conquistador, so that gives me some options here. And then we are at your turn.
Yeah, so we decided to seed the arms industry here, mainly because you were in a very strong position with having the best infantry, cavalry in hand, and then I had a copy of cannons. So it seemed like it would be very beneficial for us in the future, which then revealed the Raiders, which was very nice for us because it was also another one of those double hits for our opponents. And then moving into my turn, the Newton Republic gives me the full 7 civil actions. So leaving myself on the 11 science from previous turn gives me the full play of a republic, which is very nice. This allowed me to upgrade my 2nd farm and my 3rd mine. So I now have all of my Age A stuff fully upgraded into Age 1 farms and mines. With the lack of military actions, and as you said previously, strategy had been taken away. We felt that the Kremlin as a wonder was too good to pass up on, which would offer me a 3rd military action, albeit at the cost of one of the happy faces. But obviously, I wasn't going to complete it relatively soon, so we could look to come up with a solution for that. But also, and probably more importantly, with Jens having limited civil and military actions, and Michelangelo, it would be a very, very nice wonder for himself.
No.
Yeah, and so with my last civil actions, we decided that snagging the copy of reserves was also a very strong card for myself and for Jens as well on his 4 bronze mines, and looking to get into an Age 2 coal. It would have been very good for him also, albeit he's still shy on civil actions to get things moving, but the Republic is on the row, so he would be able to easily. So the reserves would make sense to be taken away from him, and I could make full usage of it also, especially with the Kremlin requiring.
No, I think the Kremlin is quite expensive, so reserves are very helpful. One downside is, of course, that now the Republic falls down to 1 for Jens, but I think you need to spend your last 2 civil actions somehow, and the reserves could still be useful for Jens, as you said, and it's just very nice, very useful also for yourself.
Yeah, so for keeping cards, we decided obviously to keep the tactic and the war over territory. My 2 draws, however, I didn't draw any seedable cards, so I will not be seeding at the next turn. And I drew the Napoleonic army, so another tactic that we've got knowledge of in the Age 2, so it seems to have followed on from Age 1, and we seem to be quite lucky in our draws with tactics. And my final card was another pact, unfortunately, so another useless card in the acceptance of supremacy.
No, so No, but another tactic to have knowledge of, definitely not bad. Also interesting to see now the last 2 copies of cannons are coming down the row, and we were interested to see whether both of them will be taken away or whether I will have a shot at getting one of them at my turn. Jens plays the revolutionary idea, will go for the Republic, goes for 1 coal upgrade, and indeed grabs this copy of cannons. So let's see if Arne will also grab his copy of cannons. Arne seeds, opens the barbarians. Jens has the most culture, is one of the 2 weakest, will lose the population, so that's definitely hurtful with him having not a free population. Maybe he can lose one of his bronze mines, for example. And Arne indeed takes the copy of cannons, and we will also see that he actually has a nice use case for them. He builds one and he reveals the mobile artillery. So we have drawn some tactics, but at least to make it fair, they also got a nice one for themselves. The mobile artillery puts Arne now at 17 strength, and Jens, with having the cannons in hand, will at some point be able to copy that tactic. Then Arne still has 4 civil actions left, will go for 1 upgrade for free with the efficient upgrade, takes the urban growth, the breakthrough, and then develops the team sports to maybe just be civil action efficient. Then it is my turn, and I am still the strongest. Actually, I could have seeded a civil unrest here, but the thing is, I will leave myself at least for a little bit with an unhappy worker, so that could potentially backfire. So instead of seeding, we decided to give the spy a try here. Again, war over technology against Jens maybe could have been a possibility, but again, he could develop the drama, the irrigation, go very low in science, and the gains would not be that much for myself. Of course, still bad for Jens to be locked down on very low science. So, but with the situation being like that, we rather wanted to try the spy, especially with me not needing the additional military action for anything else this turn. But Jens has the 2 defense cards to defend himself. Of course, the spy also only would have given 3 signs, but still, I thought it might be worth a try. But Jens at the end can defend himself. I could have sacrificed Rifleman to make it for certain, but that would have been quite expensive. Then the ages will end before my next turn, very likely, so I still need a new leader, and there's one that works quite well for me, available for 1 civil action, Antoni Gaudi, and if I go for him, then there's also another card that will give me quite some culture potential. That's the Opera. I have the Magic Castle to hide myself behind. I have the Acropolis to maybe go for a government form very cheaply at some point, so I think that is a very nice direction for me to go into with Antoni Gaudi and Opera. Of course, I could have had some military potential, but the cannons are now taken away from me, and for the moment I have the conquistadors that I could potentially work with, but I feel like just going for a peaceful setup should be quite nice here. Then I will elect Antoni Gaudi, increase my population, and take the urban growth, which will help me to support building an opera very quickly. And as you can see, I have now an unhappy population, so having seeded a civil unrest could have been potentially problematic. It is also a bit problematic that I still don't have a happy face solution, and there is the chance that our opponents could deny them from me, but with the opera at least I can get some happy faces from there, and there's also Marlene in the game, so I think it's a fine risk to take. And I also get some draws at the end of my turn, and another tactic, so another good tactic for us, the classic army, that not having the cannons is a lot less bad, and definitely some fortunate tactic draws for us, but at least our opponents also have a good tactic for them, so that makes it somewhat fair. And then I also draw the wealthy territory and another colonization card, and we are dual turn.
As I said before, I had no cards to seed, so the option was taken away from me anyway. And then going into my turn, decided to make the most of Newton yet again and develop the cannons for free. So we decided that we would pop and then build cannon to put warheads on foreheads, and then show the defensive army, taking me to 21 strength and making me the strongest. Also, with my limited military actions, it made sense to kind of step my military game up little by little, instead of, well, I didn't have the ability to do more in once if required. And then there were some very nice cards on the row, so we decided to take reserves, patriotism, and the organized religion, as well as diving deep for the engineering genius. which would obviously help with the Kremlin. The organized religion pick was maybe somewhat controversial, as I've been holding on to bread and circuses for the majority of age 1 and 2. But we felt with bread and circuses only offering the 2 happy faces and the organized religion giving the 3rd, with the loss of a happy face from the Kremlin, it would mitigate the impact and still keep a population free with my food for the next turn. Instead of having to build 2 bread and circuses to cover, I would then only have to upgrade the organized religion.
Yeah, so that efficiency might be quite important with the Kremlin, and also with developing the bread and circuses, you would not be able to build a cannon this turn. So of course, it's bad, especially with Pierre in the game, to give up on the bread and circuses, but here maybe there are just too important other things to do. Also, you take quite a bunch of cards from the row, which will make it that the age will end before Jens's turn. He will lose Michelangelo, doesn't have the chance to get another big production going. Napoleon will still stay on 2 civil actions, and so that also is one of the benefits of you taking that many cards. And of course, with the age ending, we will also see the Colossus draws that you get now.
Yeah, so I wasn't going to draw any cards, but thankfully the Colossus cards saw me draw 2 colony cards and the impact of science, which, given my current situation, was particularly strong for myself.
Yeah, and the colonization cards could also be useful because I have seeded a strategic territory that soon might be revealed. So overall, I think a draw to be fine with. And at Rien's turn, he loses the drama with ending the age. We also take the option away from him to go for Bach, but maybe even if he would have had that option available, Napoleon is just a safety pick that maybe he has to go for. He has a bit of a culture lead. It's not even that big. I also have produced a bit of culture, and now with Antoni Gaudi, maybe will start catching up to them. But also they wrote that they felt now a bit safer after getting Napoleon before. Jens was in a somewhat vulnerable spot, and they were quite afraid of potentially getting hit by wars or something. But now with Napoleon and also going for the Hussars tactic, which will put him at 19 strength, even avoid being the weakest for now. He is now in a more comfortable position, takes the rich land to go for another mine upgrade. At the end of his turn, we are now at the beginning of age 3, so maybe a good time to take a quick look at the overview. And what were your thoughts at this point on how the game was looking for us, and how confident were you, or how happy were you about our position?
I felt that the potential runaway train that was the Michelangelo and St. Peter's Basilica of Jens was mitigated quite nicely. So for it to be the culture to be somewhat that close, and obviously you've got Gaudi, which is a big engine in himself for culture pushing. I felt our situation was very strong actually. Economy wise, Jens is obviously looking like he's going to get age 2 farms and mines going, which for in his situation and his vulnerability has just been taken away by Napoleon, meant that he was actually looking relatively stronger or having potential, but Arne was looking quite driving strength, not having any farms and only any farms upgraded past the AJ and only 2 mines. I felt his position was quite vulnerable in comparison to your situation and my situation. Again, I think you probably looked a fair bit stronger than mine, but in the sense that you've got Himeji's castle as well to aid defending. I've obviously got a bit more strength, but I'm not as developed. The situation in comparison for the 2v2, I felt that Arne was looking very, very weak on their side, and engine was about to take off. So we had We had a good start to H3, I think, as long as we sort of played our cards right.
Yeah, I also was happy about our position at that point. Our cultural deficit is not that big, and our economical situation, I think, is better. One thing that our opponents have going on is maybe the nice ocean liner service Maria combination on Arne's side, whose economy isn't looking that great, but with the help of Maria and the mobile artillery, as well as the team sports, he might be able to build up some culture with the team sports. Also, he is prepared to maybe go into peer, so with that, they could maybe still build up something nice. Maybe Arne can go for some military pressure. So yeah, I was happy about our position, but also of course our opponents have some good things running for themselves as well. Arne seeds, the Reign of Terror is revealed. I think another event that wasn't seeded by us, so our opponents also with putting the Call to Arms into the deck maybe had the idea of pushing some strength. They wrote when with their thoughts, when they shared their thoughts. Then when I took the Rifleman, they had a bit of a plan of maybe going for a bit more strength and hoping that I might end up being the weakest. But yeah, at least for the Reign of Terror, that worked at the end, and I have to lose a population now. Arne will use his urban growth to build a team sports for 3, builds another cannon, is now 27 strength, which makes him somewhat threatening. He disbands a warrior while to build another farm to not have any famine. He takes the organized religion, that is probably a denial. He has the team sports for himself, but he sees that I still need a happy face solution, so denies the organized religion, takes the cavalryman and also a patriotism, which yeah, could help him to get even more strength. He can maybe get another army soon, and then he's certainly could be a bit threatening. Now it's my turn. We know actually what event is on top because the only H1 event is the strategic territory that I have seeded. However, both the civil unrest and the wealthy territory didn't look too great to seed at the moment because I don't have a happy phase solution, so the civil unrest could just backfire very heavily, and the wealthy territory can be a bit swingy at the end. So we decided that I won't push, but at your turn we would again have the option to push with you having the impact of science in hand. And now I go for the opera this turn. I have Anthony Gaudi. I don't have the option here to go for happy phase solutions. I think just setting up a bit of culture production should be quite nice. Going up to 14 culture production like that, I can get out of corruption with increasing my population. I know that at least the civil unrest is not in the deck, so having another unhappy worker is maybe not too bad. And then I have 2 civil actions left, which I will use to take the wave and the frugality. Luckily I have 2 H2 defense cards, so even without sacrificing I can defend against a potential aggression from Arne, and the frugality will just be extremely helpful to get more population out, while the wave of nationalism will give me hopefully 6 resources. I remain the weakest as the international negotiations coming, so I could get hit by that, but this turn that was just not really a nice way to get stronger. At the next turn, hopefully, I might be able to start building some cavalryman, maybe also soon going for a classic army tactic. I keep the tactic, 1 event, the civil unrest, as well as my colonization cards, and I get some draws. Again, somewhat fortunate tactic, the positional army. If I should get my hands on cannons quickly, on rockets quickly, then I might have an even better tactic than my classic army to work with. Impact of population is not looking that great against the ocean liner, but impact of progress is something that we maybe can work towards. And then we are at your turn.
So as you said, we had the option of seeding the impact of science as my only seedable card, which would reveal the strategic territory 1, which we decided was probably for the best at this point, considering I had good science production and we had good knowledge of it in time for you to increase your science production, and that given that I was seeding, I would have first first refusal of the territory based on any ties in bids. And given my 2 previous draws, thanks to the Colossus, we figured that Vlada would probably want me to win it with the double colonization card draw. So when bidding, I actually did go for 8, which was just the 1 swordsman with the 1 from Colossus and the 2 cards, and tied with Arne for bidding. So I did send off everything that I was willing to to send off to colonize, and with my draws, I drew another colonization card, the armed intervention and the modern army tactics. So keeping in light with the rest of the game's progress, we actually have carried on the the drawings of the tactics, which is something that keeps happening. So for my turn, I put Newton straight to work again as usual, but this time it was to fix my happy face solutions. So he was in for religious purposes this time. So we developed that for free, and then upgraded my temple, and then played reserves 2 for resources, which then allowed me to build 2 stages of the Kremlin. And then I developed the architecture first to be able to develop the architecture first to then use the 2 steps for the Kremlin before using the engineering genius to complete the Kremlin. And then I took the rifleman as a good age 2, a cheaper military tech, as opposed to the modern infantry that was on the board for my tactic and any other tactics that might require an age 3 unit. So even though it seemed less beneficial to go from swordsman to rifleman for age 3 tactics, it kind of made sense instead of taking the modern infantry, because it was cheaper, and obviously for Jens it's far more expensive for him in terms of science and resource production, which he was lacking in. So the taking of rifleman was preferred over the modern infantry. And then for my remaining civil actions, I took the urban growth and then popped, which allowed me to rebuild my swordsman, which I'd sent away on colonization duties.
Yeah, and a good thing for us to know was that even if you wouldn't have drawn another colonization card, you would have been able to defend now with just being 3 strength behind Arne. So we knew that you would be safe from any aggressions with the going for the bit.
Yeah, yeah, it was very very handy, the colonization card anyway, just as a backup, and
No,
obviously
no.
for future might be required for your territories or any sort of strength push by our opponents.
No, so I think a very clean turn by you, and with us having already myself drawn the positional army and you the modern army, of course, the rifleman just very important technology to grab. And then you again get another
Yeah.
3 draws already for the 3rd time in H3.
Indeed, yeah. So I obviously had the colonization card, armed intervention, and modern army already in hand, and then I drew a very aggressive approach in terms of a plunder, raid, and a hybrid war.
Now, so Vlada maybe sending us into a specific direction. Let's see if we will be able to do anything with that. You still have the Great Wall. As soon as we go for another defensive army, you have quite some strength potential. Then Jens seeds, and sadly I do get punished for being the weakest here, and they can now decide what I have to pay to Arne, and they actually let me pay food to Arne, which looks a bit odd when we first take a look at Arne's civilization, as he doesn't need it as much, so it will still soon be useful for him to avoid any famine issues. And for myself, I think it makes a lot of sense, as it makes my turn a bit awkward. I normally would have been able to very easily free up a bit of hand space with using the frugality, without now having lost the food. That is not possible any longer, and I will have a bit of an issue to make space in my hand at my next turn. So a good call by them. Jens takes the military theory, takes the computers, the military buildup, and increases his population to go for another knight. And he takes the military theory, so make sure to have maybe the option to go for more military actions at some point. Arne cedes. The arms industry is revealed. And for this turn, they shared that again. That was a very crucial turn for them because they have some different options here. I think Pierre is something that they definitely have to take, but then they have to make a bit of a decision on in which direction they want to go with the denials, because they have the option here to take the second copy of military theory in addition to Pierre, and maybe also the fundamentalism, and with that really cut us short of military actions, making them quite a bit more safe, making it very difficult for you to maybe make use out of some strength. So that is one option that they can do for denial. The other one would be to maybe take Pierre together with the professional spots, denying another happy face solution from me, and making it causing maybe some problems in that regard. So a tough choice for them. I think Pierre definitely has to be grabbed, and here they do go for the decision with, first of all, after building another cannon with Maria's resources, to go for Pierre and the military theory, and then developing the cavalryman, leaving me the option to go for the fundamentalism to maybe get some additional military actions, but I don't have the most science, so it would be a bit expensive for me, so they don't at the end don't go for that denial, instead go for an upgrade to cavalryman, and committing to that could be a bit of a sign that they could have already the mechanized army tactic available, and also them getting Pierre very early, and maybe soon being able to make a switch to him certainly could turn out to be quite strong for them. Now it is my turn, and I am still the weakest, but nonetheless I'm willing to push, at least for our part. We don't have knowledge about any strength events. There was even one specific event that we were hoping for here, and that is the economic progress, because as I said during Jens' turn, with taking 3 food away from me, I have really a bit of an issue with this turn, and the turn could get a lot more clean if I could just use that frugality to make space in my hand, and there is the economic progress in there which would allow me to do that, and with that, despite Arne being the strongest, me being the weakest, we decided to make that gamble, play towards hoping that economic progress might be on top. And at the end, it's actually the historic territory, and we still had some hope after that was revealed, because if I should win that, then I would be again in the earlier area of my yellow bank, meaning again I could use the frugality if I win that colony, but I wasn't willing to go for 2 riflemen here, only for 1, and that is enough to make it at Jens at the end wins the colony, which also is a bit risky for them, because Jens has now only 1 card left in hand, and you can go for safe aggression at your turn, and Vlada has given you some of those, so that was good news for us. There was actually a reason why Jens bid for that colony, but I will wait a little bit with revealing that one, as it has to do with one of the other events that is still coming. And then during my turn, I sadly can't use the frugality to make space in my hand. There were 2 main options how to make space in my hand. Either I could use the urban growth to build another opera, and then I always were going to take professional sports. I could then develop it, maybe take the urban growth to then build a professional sports for cheap soon. However, I would commit another population into opera, which could end up being a bit greedy, especially with Arne having some military potential here. And so at the end, we went with the different option, and that is to make space in my hand with going for the cavalryman, then going for the professional sports, building one without the urban growth to get out of corruption, and just at least getting the 5th urban building type with Gaudi, fixing me a happy face, it's getting a bit of additional strength going, so that felt good. The only thing that felt a bit bad is that I committed now to the cavalryman. The rockets coming down the row, I could potentially have gone into the positional army for some even bigger strength potential, but sadly with that frugality situation and the international negotiations being revealed, we had to go for a little bit of a not as clean of a turn, but at least I have the classic army, and with that I hopefully still will have a fine way of defending myself. Then I keep again the 2 colonization cards, the tactic and the impact of progress. The next draw was not too great, 2 pacts and 1 aggression. And we are at your turn, and now we can maybe do some nice stuff against Jens.
Yeah, so we agreed to try and plunder Jens's civilization, and thanks to him winning the colony, he'd left himself vulnerable, so the aggression was a guarantee to go through, which was very good for us. And obviously something that Vlad had foreseen, as he'd given me a couple of options for aggressions, which was quite nice of him. So our discussion here was whether we were gonna, what we were gonna plunder from him, and ultimately we decided, based on his civilization, we were going to take as much food as possible. So we took all of his 5 food and only 2 resources, which going into the turn, we decided that we had to either look towards military actions, which democracy offered, or there was a nice copy of computers there sitting around that with Newton would be extremely strong, and the architecture for an upgrade from scientific method would also be very, very handy. And when we discussed it, there was a second copy of democracy and communism in the deck. So if we generated more science per turn, then these were options we could address. So we took the computers, developed them again free for Newton, which seemed quite befitting, as we'd made very good use of him over his reign. So upgraded the scientific method in his name as a good tribute, and then due to the military pressure again, felt that a double population and building cannons would further push me towards either a second defensive army, but also potentially threaten defensive army entrenchments and age three other age 3 tactics. Given the fact that I've got modern army in hand, also tanks would be quite nice, as well as riflemen. So with the last few civil actions, we decided the revolutionary idea to add extra science for potential military push, or again just to get more techs going, would be very handy. And the urban growth was also very nice. We were looking at sort of replacement leaders at this point for Newton, and felt that the revolutionary idea and the added science would be very handy if, say, Gates or Jobs was to come down the road.
Yeah. So again, I think a very solid turn. The computers giving you quite a boost, and also preparing you even better for the impact of science. And here, as you just said, we decided to wait for especially Bill Gates, but also Steve Jobs with the happy faces could be nice. I thought that maybe also Marie Curie could be an interesting option here, maybe keeping Newton for now, but soon being able to increase the culture production. Also, the 3 additional strength, with Arne going for a bit of a strength push, could be relevant, but Gates just has such a potential that maybe it's the right choice here to wait for Gates, and also especially with those strong yellow cards available as an alternative to investing into the civil action into Marie Curie. Also, especially with Newton still being a perfectly solid, very, very, very strong leader that is also doing some good work. And then at the end of your turn, you get 1 draw.
Yeah, so for my 1 draw, I actually drew another colonization card. So and I have two defensive colony cards in hand: the armed intervention and the modern army tactics still.
Yeah, so no impact, but you are well equipped to defend yourself, which is good. Then it's
Yeah.
Jens' turn, and he will now go for Gandhi. And now I think it pays off for our opponents that they made sure to deny both military theories, because with our military action count, we are not really able to threaten Jens with a war or anything, and also only limited in aggressions, especially with the first blunder being already out of the deck. So Gandhi being a real, making Jens very safe from wars or aggressions here. He goes for him, goes for the revolutionary idea, the engineering genius, goes for an upgrade, takes a bunch of yellow cards, and with that ends his turn. And with him having won the historic territory to Despite me now having already quite some turns with Gaudi, he's still in front of me. Arne is not that far behind of you. He has Pierre in hand, so my confidence in our position was now a little bit less good or high than it was at the beginning of H3, because Arne looks like he could have mechanized army, has Pierre in hand. Jensen still in the culture lead, is now safe with Gandhi, so yeah, that certainly our opponents playing quite well and making sure to stay in the game here. Arne sees the economic progress is revealed, which gives yeah, both of us a nice amount of resources and food. Arne gets the least out of it. Jens gets also some solid amounts out of it. Arne will use the ocean liner service, will then switch to Pierre, plays the patriotism, builds another team sports, is now getting 4 culture per turn out of Pierre, builds another cannon with building another cannon instead of another cavalryman. Now it's, I think, very, very clear that he actually has the mechanized army, will take the endowment actually for very expensive, but those will probably be worth 6 culture for him, and he indeed reveals the mechanized army tactic at the end. Is not 46 strength, and with that is actually quite a bit dangerous in terms of both aggressions and wars, especially he left himself with 13 science, or even 17 at the end of his turn. He has just 7 resources, all of the air forces are still in the deck, and if one of them will be available for him at the next turn, which is quite likely, unless maybe the first 2 ones are now revealed for us, then he could declare war, build 1 air force, and be at 61 strength, which is quite threatening, and we now needed to make sure to be as well prepared to defend against that as possible. I then this turn can finally use the frugality, and yeah, this turn I will first of all just increase my population 2 times, build 2 cavalrymen, reveal the classic army tactic. I think those those actions have to happen for certain. With that, at least I can defend against an aggression if I'm willing to sacrifice a unit. And then I have 3 civil actions left, and here I think we mainly discussed about either just taking the United Nations, which with me having 5 different urban building types is actually giving me 20 points plus a potential impact, so a very solid wonder, and maybe the most solid one I can get. And also I have not a most civil action, so that wonder being available now, while I maybe don't have that many other things to do, maybe just a best opportunity that I might get to take a wonder. But I could also just take the reserves for 3, making sure to have more resources available, which could be very important to be better prepared to defend myself. The thing is, the reserves, if I take them, that could also be a useful card for you. Maybe also giving you either more resources or more food to get another population out. So at the end, we decided to go with the wonder pick and let the reserves be available for you. But we were very worried at that point, because while I have the Michi Castle, I sadly have not enough science to get into air forces. I have enough resources. If you get stronger than me, which you will do, then I can use the wave for 4 resources at least, and that will be enough to go for another army. I can sacrifice, so that will be a somewhat fine defense, but it won't be enough to win a war against Arne. So if Arne has a war, he very well might declare that war at the next turn, and that we were very worried about, as the culture situation is still closer than we would have liked it to be, and war, even if it's maybe not the biggest one, could be quite a setback here. I discard the pacts and draw actually a potentially interesting tactic here again. We are getting dealt quite a bunch of tactics. The shock troops I draw here, which for the moment is maybe difficult to use, but if I build 4 more cavalrymen, or if I should get Marlene Dietrich, and both of our opponents have already committed to a leader, then I only need 3 more cavalrymen, and I can actually go for the tactic, so that might actually help me in case there will be a war happening at the next turn. So quite a fortunate draw again, and then we are at your turn.
Yeah, so I didn't have any seedable cards, so the politics phase was relatively easy. Decision taken away from me. It's probably worth commenting at this point that Arna's position, considering when we looked at the beginning of H3, we thought, or at least I said I thought it looked quite weak. He's done exceptionally well to get to where he is. So the game at this point looks considerably closer than we sort of anticipated.
No, definitely true.
And Yeah, and this kind of pays into the beginning of my next turn. So I was looking to replace Newton as we spoke last time. Last turn, the Gates would have been ideal, but Steve Jobs is sitting there for one civil action, so it was very hard to pass him up, especially considering I needed a happy face solution. And so we had a decision to make, and that was whether, considering Arna's strength push, I needed to focus on some survivability. And if he did have a potential war, at least mitigating and minimizing the impact of a war. So we were definitely looking to develop riflemen, but it was weighing up whether to use Jobs' ability for the additional four culture, or whether the civil action saved by Newton would have been more beneficial to have. And ultimately, considering Arna's situation, we decided that the four culture using Jobs' ability was probably more beneficial in the long run, and we had a relatively clean turn without having to worry about saving a civil action. So we started with developing the rifleman, and then directly building a rifleman gave me some, like, a very valuable boost to strength. It also looks to threaten modern army, defensive army, entrenchments. So it keeps our opponents on their toes, I'd like to think, at least. And then upgrading another one, another swordsman, puts me on 38 strength, which, even though I have two defense cards, it puts me exactly 8 away. So it only really looks like, if I do get aggressed as opposed to ward, that I only need one defense card, and I would be able to defend myself. Then, with having taken Steve Jobs, there's a lot of cheap techs that I can potentially develop in the future in pro sports, rockets and tanks. These double up as solid strength pushing options as well, if I decide to develop them. And in the event that Arna has a war, I can also fulfill tactic, my modern army tactic. So with my last civil actions, as you said, the copy of reserves would be very handy for myself. Also gives me a valuable way of pushing strength and assisting in either food or resources. So that nicely used up all of the civil actions, even though I took a lot of cards off the row, and we were sort of driving the road down. As you said, Marlene Dietrich couldn't really go missing without an expense, so would be available for you, given that Churchill wasn't able to be taken by both of our opponents, and the internet would have been very expensive for Jens at no sort of particular gain. So we figured with those two cards that you'd still get Marlena at your next turn.
Yeah, Marlene here could turn out to be a very important leader for myself, so always important to make sure that she not out of the sudden is vanishing on the row before my next turn. And no, I think you're making good use out of your many civil actions. One thing maybe that I'm looking back at a turn we could have done differently here would be to maybe take one less technology, or maybe even use Newton for the civil action, and then with this additional civil action we could have used one of the urban growth to go for one more upgrade already this turn, making it that you have more science to work with, but at least with keeping both urban growth, you maybe, in case the game should actually progress a bit more peacefully, you maybe have also the option to use both of them on something like multimedia, for example. So could also still be fine in that way, but with having two of them in hand, maybe using one of them for another upgrade is something that we could have done differently here potentially.
Yeah.
And
And then with my one draw, I actually drew an impact, which was very good for us as well, in the Impact of Wonders. So it was a very seedable card for myself, and effectively the only seedable card I had.
Yeah, so definitely good getting an impact with that one draw. Not a very strong impact, but definitely a very solid one. Then it's Jens' turn. He will go for computers this turn, goes for 2 upgrades with that. Also, sadly for us, competing for the impact of science that is in the deck. You at the moment are still in 8 science production. And then he also takes the satellites and the civil service, and with having that science production in all of those blue techs, the impact of progress that I still have in hand looks at this point to be bad for us, and at least nice for us that we have the knowledge about it. And now, of course, things got very exciting for us because and I think also you, we are both not well enough prepared to defend against a war from Arne. We just didn't really have the possibility to set ourselves up for that. And a copy of Air Force is on the row. Arne could now declare war and go for an Air Force and attack one of us. But as we can see during his politics action, he actually cedes instead. And as a little bit of additional information, they shared after the game that at this point Arne didn't have a war in hand, which is of course unfortunate for them. That could have been a very good play for them, going now for that war, stealing some culture. But sadly, they didn't have, and good for us, they didn't have the option to do so. And now Arne Seeds and the terrorism is revealed, and the terrorism an interesting card here because first of all it's of course good for our opponents. Arne will now be able to destroy some stuff. Also has to destroy something from Jens, but he still kept that HA religion, so that is maybe not too bad to lose. But that terrorism was as they told me, the reason why early on Jens bid for that historic territory, because if Arne would have won that territory at that point, then you, Ristey, would have been the one with the least culture, and they could have lost the terrorism. So with that, they made a decision for Jens to bid for the colony, and were willing to take the risk of getting hit by an aggression. And I think also the terrorism has to do with Arne not using the Olympic Games here, because if he would have used them, then he again would have had more culture than you, so has had to hold off with the Olympic Games here because of the terrorism. With the
That's
terrorism,
very disappointing.
no.
I would have liked to have been the terroristy.
Yeah, no. So they had to at least play around a little bit around that event, which maybe was not ideal for them. But now they managed to make it work and will destroy an opera from me and a computer from you, which with the impact of science coming is actually quite a bit bad for us. And then of course the religion from Jens. Arne will then go for the democracy, and that is of course a big science investment, and tells of course that of course, with him not having a war in hand, they at this point make the decision to completely deviate from a potential aggressive push, as they also wrote to me. He's not even taking the air forces, builds another team sports, plays the endowment, and at this point just they planned on play it peacefully. That of course takes a lot of the pressure off, which makes our turns a bit more easily, or a bit not he is not as threatening any longer, but of course he is maximizing the amount of culture that he is getting. So a decision by them, and then also as a little spoiler, as they told me after the game. And now at this point, after Arne went away from the military options, he actually drew the war, so a bit of an unfortunate timing for them. But Arne still is at 48 strength, could still go for a little bit more strength, so we still have to be worried about our strength and make sure that we can go for enough defense. Now it's my turn. I will first of all use the Urban Growth 2 before I might lose it to the end of the age to rebuild that opera, gain some more culture production, now with Gaudi, but also with Marlene Dietrich, which I will go for this turn. And I think some things of the turn were very much given. I will go for the reserves, which will allow me to finish the UN at the next turn in case our opponents should decide to end the game, which will lie in the hands of Jens. I will also take Marlene. She will help me militarily. With her, even if I lose the wave, which I sadly won't be able to use, we try to make it fit into the turn, but taking the reserves in order to make sure to be able to build the UN, rebuilding the Opera, taking Marlene, all were things that at the end were more valuable. So there's now the chance that a wave of nationalism sadly will be discarded, doing nothing, same as the efficient upgrade. And but with Marlene, with having the reserves, I can go for 3 more cavalrymen, reveal the shock troops tactic, and then especially with sacrificing, I have enough strength so that Arne can't go for a war, as he for now can only go for maybe 2 cannons and a knight, or maybe also another team sports. So he can increase his strength by a bit, but not by that much now that he can't go for any air forces. And with that, and that is enough for myself to make myself capable of defending. And then at the end, most gonna discussed decision was actually whether to elect Marlene or not. At the end, we decided to keep Anthony Gaudi for 4 additional culture, but of course that might cost me a civil action if the age ends before my next turn, which is very likely. And also, if I would have elected Marlene, I could have revealed the shock troops already, which would have given me 3 additional strength. The nice thing being that even with being at 32 strength, with having those 2 H2 defense cards in hand, I can actually defend against Arne. And now if you say, wait a minute, there's a chance that maybe the age will end before Arne, then of course it is that Arne hasn't declared the Olympic Games. So with the Olympic Games that he probably wants to use, it's a bit less good for him to go for an aggression. So we were hoping that either way, the additional strength from Marlene Dietrich might not be as much needed. And then, of course, we had to think about how the loss of the civil action will affect my next turn. And if I should, for some reason, get hit by a war, or if maybe the age ends and I need to finish the UN, the civil action from Marlene probably won't matter as much. I can still do everything that I need to do, and the 4 culture that I gain now by keeping Gaudi might at the end be more valuable. I need to keep the 2 H2 defense cards now, still, even though the age ends soon, so that I can defend against an aggression from Arne. I will draw 2 impacts, impact of government not being as great, with me still being on theocracy, but impact of agriculture being a seedable one. And then we are at your turn.
So my only seedable card again was the Impact of Wonders, which kind of was a small benefit to us, and obviously with the culture for seeding made sense to seed. And we revealed the Civil Unrest, which just had no impact to anyone, which was quite nice. Then after Arna's vandalism, thanks to the terrorism card, it was actually, even though it was quite expensive, it was more welcomed than the war would have been. I believe Arne and Jens in our post-game discussions said that at this point, even though Arne hadn't had a war before, he decided to take the peaceful approach. Jens, as Gaudi, actually drew 2, so thankfully for us, hiding behind Gandhi there meant that he couldn't get a war off on us either, and he denied Arne 2, thankfully. So it was a bit of a tough turn, this one, weighing up the potential of a war versus culture pushing. So finding a balance to keep a war that could potentially happen if Jens kept the age alive from Arne. And he obviously wanted to go for one, even though he'd used his science. He could still push enough strength to declare a winning war over me, and depending on my actions, could still make it a defining war in terms of how close the culture is at this point. So we discussed a balance, and it's factored into the decision, but we decided that taking multimedia and developing it with Jobs' ability, then using the reserves 2 for food, then the reserves 3 for additional resources, allowed a pop, and then double construction of multimedias to push science. Given the fact that we were in a particularly bad position for impact of strength after the terrorism and Jens's computer push kind of left us in a situation where once the final age 2 card comes out, we didn't really want to lose the impact of science, which obviously yourself would have been the lowest production, and I would have been second. So they would have had a nice +10 on us, which wouldn't have been nice at all. So that was effectively my turn, and then in terms of cards, I had the 2 colony cards in hand and the modern army. Then with my 3 draws, I drew the impact of technology, which was another great impact to be able to seed
Yeah.
a war over culture, and then a 3rd colony card.
Yeah, so you really seem to those colonies cards are somewhat drawn to you. But now it's of course nice that you can defend yourself again very well. I think at your turn it was a tough decision between going for a bit more greedy line or a bit more safe line. Now you have invested a lot of resources, and most you can threaten probably is to go for 1 Air Force, which there are still a lot of copies left, so there's a good chance that you might get one at the next turn. But that 1 Air Force is not enough to win a war. Arne could build a little bit of additional strength, and that 1 Air Force that you could build is not enough to win the war. So it's of course the question, is it worth it to risk that war, or maybe should you build 1 multimedia less and keep some more resources, which then would be at the danger of the impact of science being revealed before your next turn and also missing out on some culture from the multimedia. But the thing is, with Arne not having gone for war at the turn before, we thought that he might just not have one, and if he would need to draw one now with the remaining 3 cards. And one good thing for us could also be that I have actually drawn the positional army earlier, which, if you would have it in hand, would allow you to actually win the war if you go for 1 Air Force, reveal the positional army, and then get some additional strength with that H3 tactic. And we knew that they don't have knowledge about the tactic, and if they go for war, it's already would be a close one, and they could just lose it if you have the tactic. And they saw that you were willing to go for those investments, and maybe they thought it could mean that you have this tactic available. And so we were hoping that either Arne just doesn't have a war, or that if he has one, he might be too afraid to declare it, as he might also maybe want to try finishing his internet, and also might be afraid of a positional army from you.
Yeah, it was definitely a balancing act between how greedy we wanted to play, and I think given the close situation, we figured that maybe the bluff of the positional army with the added knowledge was worth the gamble. Much like when we decided on your turn to not elect Marlene and keep Gaudi.
Yeah, so now we were of course hoping that we wouldn't get punished for the decision, and also we were interested to see if Jens would NDH. It's very difficult for him to do, and with him building the religion, it's already clear that he won't be able to do it. He would need to develop the civil service and then spend as many actions as possible just on taking cards, 3 from the first row and then another 2 from the second row. So he won't NDH, and instead there will be another turn, which might also allow Arne to actually finish his internet, which he at the moment would not have enough resources for. Jens will then develop the military theory, takes the patriotism, plays the revolutionary idea, takes the tanks. And culture-wise, I have now overtaken Jens, but Arne can now go for the Olympic Games, might get a solid internet, so he might be able to catch up to you a bit. And again, the politics action from Arne, where we were very excited to see, and again, no war, also no aggression. And yeah, here Arne goes for the Olympic Games and then seeds an impact into the deck. The vast territory is revealed, which we figured that none of us really wants it, as we don't really want to rebuild and want to focus on our resources just on maximizing the culture points. I at the end was still willing to bid a little bit, just in the hopes of Arne maybe, or either opponent who wins it having to pay a little bit more. Sadly, Arne is also still, as same as I, has 2 H2 colonization cards remaining, meaning even with me making that the bid go a little bit up. He is still able to just win it for a single warrior. He will then use the ocean liner service. He will increase his population normally. That gets him out of corruption. He builds an additional farm, and that's an interesting side here. Of course, it's something that could easily be overlooked, but he doesn't really need a farm this turn for to fix his famine. He could have just built it at the next turn, and that I think is a sign. Maybe he just does it to already spend a civil action, but it could be a sign towards two impacts, either the impact of harmony, which is increased by 4 with building that farm, or the impact of balance, which is increased by 2 by building that farm. So it could be that one of those impacts might be under the next 4, so definitely something to take note of. And then we have Arne has another bunch of civil actions left, takes the multimedia, the communism, the engineering. Sadly, will make it that the age ends before my turn, so I will lose Anthony Gaudi. And then again, another very interesting choice here, building another team sports, leaving himself with not enough resources to finish the internet. He hasn't built any stages of that wonder yet. And that, of course, it could potentially be just a misplay happening by accident, but probably that means that Arne has actually an aggression in hand, that he plans on getting the additional resources. There are no H2 events left. And of course, an aggression is somewhat risky, as he doesn't know whether it will hit against me or you. But Jens, his teammate, of course, against him he can go for the aggression for certain. So let's see how his next politics action again will look like. He then takes the air forces, the revolutionary idea. Now it's my turn, and the only impact that is really worth seeding for me, and that might also only end up being a neutral one, is the impact of agriculture. However, we decided to pause here a little bit with the seeding, because one of the impacts out of the next 4 is actually the impact of science, the only one seeded by S in that event deck, in the current one. And the idea with my next turn was actually to maybe overtake Arne in the impact of science, and so we waited with seeding here. I go for Marlene Dietrich this turn. I could potentially take the reserves, build another opera. Without taking the reserves, I won't be able to build another opera and the United Nations at the next turn. So if I want to build another opera, which is of course giving me some additional culture production with Marlene, I would need to take the reserves, but we figured that there is a better turn for me to go for, and which also then of course leaves the reserves available for you, which will allow you also some other options for your turn. So I didn't go for the reserves here, and instead of building another opera, I reveal the shock troops tactic, and I go for another printing press. That one additional science that the printing press is giving me allows me actually to, when I take now the oil and the mechanized agriculture, to go for 2 more technologies instead of only 1, or if I would have gone for the opera plus reserves play, I wouldn't have had enough civil actions to even develop 1 more tech. So just by building that 1 science and taking those 2 techs, I already gained +8 from the impact of technology that you are having in hand. And then there was again a bit of a decision between going for a greedy line or for a more safe line, because in addition to taking those 2 technologies, instead of building the step, which you can see we did at the end here, it could have been an option to disband the Rifleman and actually build immediately another printing press, which I would still leave me with enough resource to finish the United Nations at the next turn. And with that additional printing press, I would already now overtake Arne for the impact of science, so that could be quite swingy if the impact of science is already revealed before our next turn. However, disbanding this Rifleman would mean that I would need 2 defense cards to defend myself if I would be willing to sacrifice, instead of only needing 1 defense card. Of course, I don't have any defense cards, so I can't defend anyway. However, Arne at his next turn might go for plunder, which he could either go for against Jens, with him actively not having left himself with enough resource to finish the internet. He could go for a safe one against Jens, but he could also, of course, if maybe they feel they are a bit behind, they could try one against us. And then it would be beneficial if they go for an aggression, if it would be ideal for us if they choose you for a target. And now we are in a situation where we could maybe end up being a bit fortunate. You have a lot of defense cards, I have actually none, but if I don't disband a Rifleman, I only need 1 to defend, while you, with the turn that you will be going for, will need 2 to defend. So for them it could make sense, if they should try an aggression against us, that they choose you as a target, which would be in our interest, as you actually have the defense cards to defend, even though you need more. So if I drop down to 32 strength with disbanding the Rifleman, I would now need 2 defense cards, and it gets a lot more likely that Arne would actually try an aggression against me. And that at the end felt too risky, as it could cost me finishing my wonder, it could allow Arne to finish his wonder. And the good thing is, you only have 1 impact to seed, so you can wait until the last turn for seeding. And if Arne indeed plans on going for that plunder, he might also not seed, meaning there might not be that many impacts revealed before my next turn. And at my next turn, I can actually seed, because if Arne doesn't increase the science production, I would win the tiebreaker, and then during my next turn, I could disband a Rifleman or get the population from elsewhere and build another printing press. So that was an interesting choice during the turn. And here, in contrast to your last turn, we decided to play it a bit more safe, which I think was the right call in the situation, with hopefully the impact of science not being revealed before my next turn, or at least the chance of that being revealed at most being a 50% chance if both of our opponents should decide to seed. And a double technology grab here will allow myself to get a +8 for the impact of tech at my next turn. So a tough decision during my turn, and then we are at your turn, where things, I think, were a little bit more straightforward.
Yeah, it was definitely one of the more straightforward turns that I've had. But we started off with deciding that we wouldn't seed, and the only impact that I had was probably better off coming out on my final turn. So we had a look, and for those of you that are avid Civ 6 players or Civilization players, like myself, the thought of leaving Gandhi with nukes was not very welcoming. So we looked at potentially taking either the Empire State or the Manhattan Project, and whichever one would sort of be more beneficial to us, as well as taking away from Jens. So after discussion, I think we agreed that taking the Manhattan Project was the better approach. And with grabbing the Manhattan Project, the mechanized agriculture was another very cheap tech for Steve Jobs. So we developed that, also paying the 1 resource for the 4 culture. And as you mentioned before, the copy of reserves also set up for a very, very clean last turn, also in the fact that I could play it for resources and go on a developing spree with Steve Jobs, which doubled down because of the impact of technology that I had in my hand.
No, so I think a very straightforward turn. And also, again, it might be beneficial for us that you will at the next turn need every single resource to develop the 3 techs and finish the Manhattan, because that could make Arne think that if you actually have only 1 or no defense card, or if you have only 1, that it could be good for you to take the risk of getting hit by an aggression, as you might just get so much additional culture with not spending any resources of going for more strength. So there is some hope that if Arne decides to go for an aggression against us, that you will be the target here with needing another defense card, and with it also being plausible of letting yourself vulnerable with that very solid turn that you have upcoming now at your next turn. And now you have just enough resources for the 3 techs in the Manhattan Project, so that's very great. Now it's Jens' turn. If he seeds, it will be we have to hope that impact of science isn't coming out. He is seeding, but we get lucky here. The impact of science stays in the deck for now. Impact of happiness is revealed instead, one of our opponent's impacts, which gives them +4 in total. And then Jens will develop the tanks, increases his population, plays the military builder, plays the patriotism, builds actually an additional HA lab. That could also potentially be consequential at the last round that is ahead of us. And then he will use all of the additional resources for the military to go for some upgrades, builds an additional tank, goes for another upgrade, is now at 36 strength, takes the air forces, and him just making sure to get 1 strength ahead of me really made it look like Impact of Strength could actually be one of the seeded events, which he might already prepare himself for. Maybe also competition could be in there. Now it's Arne's turn, and let's see if he has an aggression to get the necessary resource to finish the internet, and if yes, which player will be the target of his aggression. He could, if he has one, go for a safe aggression against Jens, his team partner, or he could choose between one of us, and go for against one of us. If he would choose to go against me, that could be an extremely big swing. He could finish his wonder while I couldn't finish the United Nations. So that was another, again, always at Arne's politics phase. We were were quite afraid or very excited to see what he will do. And as you can see, he went for a plunder against Jens here, so went for the safe aggression and getting the additional resources here. Plays the revolutionary idea, goes for the military theory, builds an additional warrior, which could net him 2 points for the impact of variety, and finishes the internet for 21 points. And then with building that warrior, he is also at 52 strength. Again, a very big indicator that Impact of Strength is in there, because if you finish the Manhattan Project, you are at 51, so Arne really making sure to be just the 1 strength ahead of you here. Now actually all cards drop down the row already. As always a sign that the age almost ended before it's ended, and the cards already now being all gone. The one impact that I haven't had that I can seed is the impact of agriculture, which I will seed now, thanks to it being my turn. I would win the tiebreaker for the impact of science against Arne, so I can seed without there being any risk. And impact of science is actually revealed, which we were very happy to see, because now we get a +10 against our opponents, and there was a chance that we would not get that +10, because you at your next turn can't increase your science production, or it would come at a too big of a cost. And I could have increased my science production this turn in addition to finishing the United Nations, but if the impact of science would have been revealed during Jens' turn, then it would have been actually a neutral impact. So we were really hoping that it would be one of the next 2 events, either revealed at my turn or during your turn, so that, or maybe Jens could have no event to seed, and then it would be revealed during the final impact evaluation, which would also be fine for us. So here we get a good timing with the impact of science, especially because now we know that it is already out, meaning that it is not mandatory for me to go for the additional printing press. I will finish the United Nations for 20 points. My impacts are not worth evaluating, so I won't evaluate any of those. I will develop the 2 technologies for the impact of technology. And then with the last civil action, before the impact of science was revealed, the plan was to disband a rifleman, build another printing press. Now that isn't necessary any longer. It could still be worthwhile for 1 safe culture, 2 points for impact of balance, 1 point for impact of agriculture, for impact of architecture. And also, actually, I would overtake Arne in culture production. So for the impact of culture, it would be quite a big swing. However, we didn't expect that impact to be in the deck. And so at the end, we decided to rather keep the rifleman, because 1 potentially bad impacts could be impact of harmony and impact of competition, which I would hurt with both of them. I would hurt with disbanding a rifleman, and we did some rough calculations and saw that our position is looking quite fine. And so I think that a position that makes sense to play against bad impacts and try to stay as well prepared as possible for them. And almost I overlooked it with the last civil action. Now that I don't build a printing press, I can of course go for a farm upgrade, which also gives me 2 save points for the impact of agriculture. With that, it's of course even more clear that keeping the rifleman and not going for the additional printing press is the best move here. And so the impact of science being out here, allowing for better impact preparation. Then we are at your turn.
Yeah, so after the rough calculations, we felt position was somewhat Uh, Somewhat comfier in the fact that we didn't need to take risks, and the seed of the impact of tech, which we'd been setting up for, was mandatory. So seeding the impact of tech revealed the impact of harmony, which was one of the events where we'd suspected they'd seeded and kind of tried to play against. The impact of harmony anyway was a 36 to 44 point um, loss for us. So we were an 8 culture deficit, but the impact had to go in regardless. So my relatively easy turn was just played out by using reserves 3 for resources and the revolutionary idea to allow me to complete my techs. Then the building of the 3 stages of the Manhattan Project earned me 11 culture for my science production, as well as taking me up to 51 strength. So I was one behind Arne, which we assumed they were either using for the impact of strength. So I sat behind in strength, but was up to sort of second. And then for my last 3 civil actions, using Steve Jobs for each, I developed rockets, tanks, and pro sports, which earned me an additional 12 culture, as well as boosting the impact of tech that I just pushed into the deck.
Yeah, so very, very clean last turn, and basically it played itself. It was played by itself. There was not really any alternative to consider, I think.
Yeah, I
And
think we'd set it up quite nicely, and really, I think it was about all we could do.
yeah, no. So really getting some nice use out of Steve Jobs here, I guess scoring more culture by your leader at your last turn compared to what you scored by your wonder. And then it's Jens's last turn. Let's see if he has another impact. He has one. The one revealed is, as suspected, impact of strength, which is a good one for our opponents, giving them plus 10 against us. And then he will go for the civil service, the satellites. Luckily for us, we know that the impact of progress is not in the deck. Jens destroys the lab. Maybe that he built in anticipation of the impact of science will instead build an additional farm, which is a good call because I have seeded impact of agriculture into the deck. And before the final impacts, we have a relatively solid lead. I think about 37 or culture, if I'm not mistaken, but at least something in that um, about that direction. So we have quite a bit of a lead. We have some solid impacts, and at this point, we were very confident about our position. But let's see what the final impacts have to say. Impact of balance is the first one. That is a solid one for our opponents, especially Jens is scoring nicely in that one, especially also with building that additional farm. There's the impact of agriculture, which also ends up being slightly beneficial for our opponents, with Jens having built that additional farm. There's the impact of colonies, that is also slightly beneficial for our opponents, so they are catching up slowly. The impact of variety is revealed, giving me also a solid amount of culture, and ending up giving our opponents plus 2 against us. We have the impact of technology that was seeded by us and gives us, I think, plus 8 against our opponents. And then the last impact is the impact of wonders, which was also seeded by us, also gives us some benefits. And with that, we at the end are able to win this game, I think, by 36 culture lead, if I'm not mistaken, or 38 maybe even. Let me quickly calculate. So I am at 16 difference from Jens, and you have 13 difference to Arne. So 29 culture difference. I hope I'm not mistaken. Maybe
That's correct. Yeah.
Okay. My mind is a little bit exhausted after the long recording, so it's always dangerous to do some math problems and calculations at this point, but I hope I got it correctly. But what is clear in any regard is that at the end we were able to win the game, which we were of course very happy about. But yeah, a tough fight that Arne and Jens pulled out, especially pulled off, especially because when we take a look back at the beginning of H3, I think we were, and also rightly so, relatively confident about our position with how things were looking, but in H3 they really played quite well and made it that we were quite afraid, especially during that one time when Arne could have gone for a war. If he would have had one, who knows how the game would have ended. Luckily for us, he didn't have one, and with that we could finish the game peacefully, and at the end were able to win the game. Also after the game, there was some discussion going on whether Arne maybe should have tried the blunder against one of us, as maybe the hit against us and with one of us not being able to finish the wonder maybe was needed in order for them to catch up. So maybe he should have tried going for the blunder against one of us to and go for that risky play in order to play towards their outs. But at the end, probably they would have chosen you as the target, as you looked more vulnerable, which then the blunder would have failed, and the difference in culture would have even bigger at the end. So if they would have done the call to go for against me with the aggression, who knows? I wouldn't have been able to finish United Nations. 20 points would have been missing. Maybe it would still be enough, but it would have gotten a lot closer. Yeah, so an exciting finish. So, what was your feeling after the game has ended, and what is your final analysis and conclusion at the end?
Yeah, it was very much similar to yourself. I thought that our opponents played a very strong H3 and managed to develop their civs to a point where the culture that I kind of expected them to take off with age one didn't really materialize, and then from the situations at the beginning of age three, they managed to actually keep it keep it close. And then with the military potential that Arne had, we got quite fortunate that he didn't draw the wars and that Jens drew them. I think if there was a couple of wars in there, it might have changed our play, especially at a time when I was only on uh, three military actions. Well, 2 to 3 military actions, and particularly vulnerable. And then those bluffs, maybe paying off. And then with the coin toss, I think it might have been a different. It would have been a very big gamble, I think, if they'd have over me. But if that coin toss that they flipped had gone right and they had hit you, I think it might have been a different outcome at the finish. If you couldn't finish the wonder, Jens obviously had more resources, and yeah, the game definitely could have took a less favourable finish for us.
Yeah, so a very exciting finish until the very end, especially during Arne's politics phases. We always very exciting moments for us. But with that, with us not getting punished, luckily, by those politics phases too heavily, at the end we are able to win that game, and with that we are at the semifinals. So now it's also again getting very exciting. Yeah, one more game to win, and we are playing at the finals. So that will also be very interesting to see how those games will be going. And yeah, I would say with that we are at the end of the video. I thank you, Ristey, for taking the time to be part of that video again. Always interesting to hear the things from your perspective as well. So thanks for being here.
It's always my privilege and an honour for you to ask, and I'll always jump in as and when you see my input as valuable. So thanks very much for asking me, and thanks to our opponents for a very strong showing and giving us a very hard pushed game, which generated a lot of thought into turns.
Yeah, so definitely a great game played by our opponents as well. Also very nice of them to share some of their thoughts after the game, which I tried to yeah, bring into the video a little bit as well. And yeah, with that, I hope it was an exciting video for our viewers. Let me know in the comments what you think of that game and what you think of the team championship if you want to see more games of that particular tournament. And yeah, with that, I say thank you all for watching and see you in the next video.